AMD launches new CPUs and GPUs, but refuses to give us the pricing. Dell decides that they're gonna go the way of Apple, but way worse. And I honestly cannot believe the RTX 50 series. I am flabbergasted. Let's get into the hot news, everybody. I'm your Brett host. We're gonna be going over the hottest tech news that I can find on the internet while you enjoy your breakfast this Tuesday, January 7th, 2025. We are here at CES in Vegas, and we just got done watching all of the keynotes. AMD, Intel, and Nvidia all happened today, so there is a slew of tech news for us to get through. It's gonna be intense, but I do want to remind you that we do have PC giveaway going on over on our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/UFD Tech. It's only a 4090 PC at this point. We didn't have access to the 50 series, but you can go check it out, twitch.tv/UFD Tech. We'll be announcing the winner later this month. Love to have you over there, and I would love to have a lot of the things AMD announced at CES this week in my system. They announced the new X3D chips. We've got the Ryzen 9 high-end X3D, and it's essentially everything the rumors told us it was going to be. They have the same amount of 3D cache as the 9800 X3D. It's only on one CCD, so it doesn't fix the core parking issue, and it's going to be coming out sometime in Q1. They did show it versus the previous generation, 8% faster versus the 7950 X3D, allegedly 20% faster versus the Core Ultra 9285K, and then it's better in content creation than both of those chips as well, speaking specifically of the 9950 X3D at 170 watt TDP. The only real thing to point out here was that there was no hard timeline for when these things are going to come out. They did say March, but obviously that could slip, especially given the stock of the 9800 X3D. They are appearing to have trouble keeping these things in stock, but they also didn't give us a price indication, which I don't think is quite good. I think that's going to mean that these are very expensive, even compared to something like the 9950X. It's not going to be easy on your wallet, but they are also bringing more X3D variants to laptops. They showed off Fire Range with the 9000HX3D, the 9955HX3D, 16 cores, 5.4 gigahertz boost with 144 megabytes cache, getting that 3D stack level 3 cache in there. It's supposed to be available sometime in the first half of 2025. There are non-X3D variants, but this is supposed to be a very competent gaming CPU in gaming laptops. Remains to be seen. AMD does this all the time with laptops. They say it's going to launch in the first half. They don't actually get units out in the first half, and then it's going to be the second half when we finally start seeing it. They pop up around October, and by that point it's like, well, they're going to announce new stuff at CES 2026, so why would I even consider it? We've been around this enough with AMD that I'm not confident they're going to hit that first half timeline, but I can be pleasantly surprised. And a lot of people were unpleasantly surprised when it came to the actual announcement of the GPUs. AMD did technically announce their new RX 9070 GPUs. They just didn't do it from the stage. And in fact, this was one of the very first CES keynotes that I saw from AMD that didn't have Dr. Lisa Su as the main presenter. It was another employee from AMD who was giving all of the details. But the keynote concluded without a peep about the GPU's main on stage, and instead they just published it to Tech Press afterwards, put it up on their website, and indeed confirmed that the 9070 XT is going to be coming out, as well as the RX 9070, so the new naming scheme is there. Again, no real hard, fast release date. Q1 2025 is what they're saying, and no pricing, which we'll talk about in a second. But they did say it's the RDNA 4 architecture. It has better ray tracing accelerator, better media coding, better AI, all of the good buzzwords. It's faster, all of that kind of stuff. They also did show the nice, helpful chart for the rebranding, showing that the 7900 XT is kind of comparable to the 9070 XT, which is where it is, which means pricing better not be at that price point because of the 50 series, which we'll get into in a second because we do have details there. But the RX 9000 series allegedly should be, 7900 GRE to 7900 XT at the higher end, and then the 9070 should be around the 7800 XT, 7900 GRE performance. We'll see how that holds up. Some of that might be based on AI, some of that might be based on ray tracing, but there was no pricing given, especially because AMD had their keynote before Nvidia's. And as has been the case in many instances in the past, especially when you look at their naming scheme, they appear to be copying Nvidia. They just want to know, what is Nvidia going to price their 50 series at so that they can come out and say, oh, the 9070 XT is much more competitive at given price here, which will get, I think it's going to hurt AMD a lot. And it's a good thing they didn't release the pricing because the 50 series is wild. But also what appears to be a wild thing is that FSR 4 was also kind of leaked by AMD, and it appears to be exclusive not to the RX 9000 series, but rather the RX 9070 and 9070 XT. There were details of the 9060 and 9060 XT that could potentially be coming out, but according to the FSR 4 upgrade on this like little fine text, fine print on this promotion, it is only available on the RX 9070 series. So it's not going to be available for the RX 7000. It's not going to be available for previous generations. It's just going to be for the higher end GPUs, which, if that's true, appears to be a big bummer. They're locking software behind hardware, very much like Nvidia is doing, but a little bit worse, to be quite honest. So we'll see if that actually plays out, or if that's just some fine print that could be adjusted later on. So a little bit of a disappointment. They didn't talk about it on stage. They didn't give pricing. They didn't give release dates. It's kind of a non-known entity, and they didn't really give any gaming performance. It's really a strange move by AMD to give us nothing, and it could be because they were talking before Nvidia and they didn't want to play their hand out because they wanted to play the copycat game to understand where their position is in the market, but they didn't get the prime spot at CES. The $3 trillion company got the prime spot, and AMD just had to make do with the leftovers. AMD's official story as to why they didn't show off the GPU was that they only had 45 minutes for their presentation, and as I'm recording right now, Jensen is still talking about AI and all of the nonsense there. Michael's in the corner laughing right now. He's getting a lot of time, but there have been shorter keynotes by AMD where they've covered just as much ground and they included GPUs. So I don't know that that's exactly an excuse. It appears like they're just trying to hide a little bit. I don't know. They seem to be ashamed of this new generation. We'll see if that's actually true or if it's I'll eat those words later on. But I didn't have to eat my words when it comes to Strix Halo. I've been hyping up this APU since it first got rumored about a year ago. So this is the essentially PlayStation 5 APU that's going to be coming to laptops. It's supposed to have 16 cores, 40 compute units, a ton of teraflops, just in a 120 watt TDP package, and that's exactly what we got. AMD talking about Strix Halo with its garbage name. It's basically like they took a marketing intern, they took their failed exams, run it through an AI generator, and that's how they came up with the name of the Ryzen AI Max Plus Pro 395. But regardless of that, the specs are incredible. 16 cores, 32 threads, 5.1 gigahertz boost, 80 megabytes of cache, 120 watts, 40 graphic compute units, and based on all the details that we know, that should put it in the realm of like a 7600 XT, 6700 XT, a very capable performer in a small form factor. Will we get handhelds with this? Potentially, especially with it having the range of TDP from 45 to 120 watts. But I'm excited for things like the ROG Flow Z13, a 13-inch tablet pack in the Strix Halo. I want something like that. I'm intrigued by that. Additionally, AMD showed off some details of this AI Max Plus 395 compared to the M4 Pro chips from Apple, which was pretty bold of them, showing that it does do okay in things like productivity benchmarks. I'm intrigued with this. I want to see more about it. Strix Halo appears to be not a disappointment. As far as we know, pricing's probably going to be high. Again, release date, just nebulous. Sometime this year, they're gonna give it to us. But I wish Dell didn't give this to us. I wish Dell would have kept this one. Again, just with the reference of failed marketing students having their exam papers just run through an LLM. That's what Dell did here, except for they took failed applicants to work at Apple's marketing department because they decided to get rid of everything that made Dell unique. XPS, Inspiron, Precision, Optiplex, those names are dead. They're gonna be replacing it with the very simple branding. Very demure, very, what's the meme? Very mindful. You have the Dell laptop, you have the Dell Pro laptop, and you have the Dell Pro Max laptop. But don't worry, there's more than that because with the Dell laptop, you have the Dell Base, the Dell Plus, and the Dell Premium. Then you have the Dell Pro, which can go Dell Pro Base, Dell Pro Plus, or Dell Pro Premium. And then you have the Dell Pro Max, which can go Dell Pro Max Base, Dell Pro Max Plus, or Dell Pro Max Premium. I'm sick. CES doesn't technically start till today, but I just want to vomit at all of this marketing nonsense. It just feels so hive mind. It feels like they see what's happening with Nvidia's market share and they're like, we should just all funnel in towards AI and the like lamest marketing possible and just try to capitalize on other people's successes instead of making our own pathway. And I don't like it. Let me know what you think of it down below in the comments. While Reece probably doesn't have deals, he's currently streaming the Nvidia keynote at like 4:35 a.m. his time, so he might be going back to bed instead, but in case he has deals, here they are.
Yo, welcome back to UFD Deals, bringing the hottest tech deals on the internet. You guys get sleepy Reece today because I was up all night watching the Nvidia keynote with you guys, so thank you for those who joined me for that, and you know, hey, here's the deals. First up, we have the Aula F99 wireless hot swappable mechanical keyboard going for $66.31, making it $16.58 off. But then next up, we have the Samsung 24-inch 1080p 100Hz IPS monitor going for only $69.99, nice, making it $60 off. And then lastly, we have this MSI B760 Gaming Plus Wi-Fi LGA 1700 motherboard, which you can pick up for only $135.17, making it $50.25 off. And hey, with that, the deals are done. You can find these and more linked in the video description down below. But until next time, I'm gonna hand you back to Brett for the rest of your hot news, and I'm gonna go sleep. Cheers.
Well, maybe Reece, maybe not. Here's the deal when it comes to gaming handhelds. AMD also announcing their Z2 chips that are supposed to be going into gaming handhelds. But this is, again, everything that we heard about in the rumors seems to be confirmed. Z2 Go, Z2, and Z2 Extreme being announced. 8 cores, 16 threads on the Z2 Extreme, 16 graphics cores. And AMD showed this weird slide saying that the Z2 processor should be in the Valve Steam Deck, which seemed to excite a lot of people, especially because the Z2 Extreme should be a significant performance bump from the setup that's currently in the Steam Deck. But a member of Valve's team had to come out specifically and say that there is and will be no Z2 Steam Deck. It's not going to happen. They think that AMD likely just said that their architecture is powering these handhelds, and they just poorly worded the slide. There's no Z2 Steam Deck. They probably will have another custom SoC. It's going to be completely different. But what's also slightly different is Acer coming out with their Nitro Blaze handheld. It's mostly the Legion Go, except for they're coming in with an 11-inch touchscreen version, a big, I mean, it's not that big, right? Like this is average size, right? 11 inches, that's average?
So I've been told.
Okay, I've also been told that. So it appears to be 2560 by 1600, 120 hertz refresh rate, 500 nits of brightness, has the detachable joysticks, 11-inch. It looks to be a pretty capable handheld. It's not going to be getting the Strix Halo, which would make it a lot better. It's going to be getting the 8840HS, 16 gigs of RAM, and up to 2 terabytes of storage. But they're looking to start at $1,100, which is quite expensive. However, there aren't that many large gaming handhelds out on the market. You could get something like a Steam Deck and a portable monitor, but this appears to be a more cohesive package. And that's exactly what HDMI and DisplayPort are trying to do, because they announced new standards at CES as well. HDMI 2.2 is now official, going up to 96 gigabits per second of throughput, which is double what the previous generation of HDMI 2.1 was, which was 48 gigabits. Now they will come with new specific Ultra 96 cables. So these are the cables that will tell you that is capable of doing that 96 gigabits per second of throughput, which, in case you're wondering, what does that practically mean? It practically means you can do 12K up to 120 FPS if you do some display stream compression. It can do 8K at 240 FPS with that display stream compression. But if you don't want to do DSC, you could do 8K 120 FPS. So HDMI 2.2 appears to be a pretty substantial upgrade, which I know a lot of the times people are like, who needs that? Who even has an 8K TV? My retort is normally, you want standards like this to outpace the technology that we currently have. Because what you wouldn't want is something like your RTX 4090, your PlayStation 5, 5, your Nintendo Switch 2, outpacing the standard of the HDMI cable. Let's say an HDMI cable never updated its standards and it still can only support 720p 30. That would mean you're not getting the full capability on your display. It's good for the standard to outpace the tech that we have, whether that's panel technology or even the graphics technology to output it. This is a welcome improvement, and obviously we're not near that capability just yet for that single cable. DisplayPort also announcing that they have a new active cable specification for DisplayPort 2.1, allowing for 3 times longer 80 gigabit per second cables, making it slightly better for everybody. Which, now, let's talk about slightly better, the RTX 50 series. I was blown away because as Jensen was on stage showing off the new Blackwell GPUs, he was holding a 2-slot graphics card and talking about how it had 32 gigabytes of RAM, how it had a 1.8 terabytes per second of memory bandwidth. He was describing the 5090 while holding a 2-slot GPU, and he confirmed that it was the 5090, which I still cannot believe, but we'll get to that in a second. So we have the specs confirmed for the RTX 5070, 5070 Ti, 5080, and 5090. As well, we have pricing confirmed on this, which, in case you were worried about price increases, in case you're a reasonable consumer, they are coming to you. Only the RTX 5090 saw a price increase from the 4090, and the RTX 5080 is coming in at $999, which is the equivalent price of the 4080 Super. It is technically, in the worst way, a price decrease from the 4080 because that launched at $1,200. The 5070 Ti is coming in at $749. Again, no price increase there. And the 5070 is coming in at $549, which allegedly should be very good. Jensen did say on stage that the 5070 should be equivalent to the RTX 4090, but I would put a heavy asterisk on that, and we'll talk about that in a second as we evaluate their performance slides. But again, also VRAM, very limited in case you wanted improvements. The 5070 staying the same at 12 gigabytes of GDDR7. It is very fast, coming in at 672 gigabytes per second, but it is not more. The 5070 Ti is coming in at 16 gigabytes at 900 gigabytes per second of memory bandwidth. The 5080 is also 16 gigabytes at almost a terabyte per second. And the RTX 5090 is coming in at 32 gigabytes at 1.8 terabytes per second. That's likely where a lot of the pricing went to, was increasing that memory as well as increasing their profit margins to absorb a lot more money from the people who want to buy a 5090. I think this is kind of best case scenario, right? Only the 5090 is a price increase. Technically, this is going back to the 3090 Ti pricing that was launched at $1999. So it's kind of reminiscent of that, which I think best case scenario, it is only the ultra wealthy or the people who need it for content or the people who seriously take this as their only hobby and are willing to expend any cost. The people who are buying 4090 Strixes at launch, they have to pay the price premium, and everybody else stays where things were, which was very high. People don't like it, but they at least didn't increase the price. But the 5090, let's take a look at this for a second, comes in at a 575 watt TDP, an increase from the 4090 of a lot. The 5080 is at a 360 watt TDP, 5070 Ti is at 300 watts, and the 5070 is at 250 watts. But that 575 watts is packed into this high density PCB that Jensen showed off, and it's being cooled by a 3D vapor chamber with only 2 double flow fans. This is a 2-slot card. It is not 2.5 slots. It's not 3 slots. This is essentially, as far as I could tell based on Jensen holding it on stage, was the exact same size as a 4070 Super Founders Edition. Maybe it's a little longer, but it's 2 slots. It's an incredible thing where I can't even believe that it's actually real. But when you look at Nvidia's RTX 50 series page, they show off, this says RTX 5090, that is a 2-slot card. I'm in disbelief that this is possible. I don't understand how they are cooling 575 watts through that little of a space. Maybe it's a lot longer than I'm thinking it is, but this appears to be defying what I understand of thermodynamics with heat sinks and airflow. I just don't understand how this is possible. They didn't spend a whole lot of time discussing it, so I'm flabbering my mouth at how wild this is. But now let's go ahead and talk about performance, because Jensen did not discuss this on stage. And one of the things to note is that when they discussed the price, they didn't give you the CUDA cores. They didn't give you the VRAM amount. They didn't give you gaming performance. They told you the AI tops performance. 1000 AI tops for the 5070, 3400 for the 5090. In case you're wondering what the comparison is, the 4090 came in at roughly 1300. So the 5070 Ti and up are way better at AI than the 4090 was, in case you wanted to know those details. But they did post at least some gaming specs over on their website. Now we're going to talk about this. Take this with the biggest grain of salt you could possibly imagine, because these are wild charts. So they show very few games. You have Far Cry 6, A Plague Tale Requiem, Cyberpunk, Alan Wake 2, Black Myth Wukong, and then some rendering stuff, more professional applications for the 5090. They show in ray tracing, the Far Cry 6 is about 1.25 times better. Plague Tale Requiem with DLSS and ray tracing is about 1.5. Cyberpunk 2077 is 2.25 times better, but you can't even see that because the chart doesn't even show that. Alan Wake 2 with DLSS and full ray tracing, that's also like 2.5 times better. Black Myth Wukong is also like 2.5 times better. And you'll notice that this is showing with DLSS and full ray tracing. This is not rasterized performance. This is not your raw FPS. This is when you're cranking all of the settings up, and with the new DLSS 4 rendering that they're using with the Tensor cores. So the 5090, technically in the most demanding scenarios where you're cranking everything up to 2.5 times better. 5080, very similar type chart, more like 2 times better than the 4080. 5070 Ti, also 2.25 times better, and the 5070 about 2 times better. But you look at like Far Cry 6, it's the ray tracing. If that's only 1.4, 1.3 times based on this chart, that's my best guess. Rasterized performance can't be that much better as far as I can understand it, if they're only choosing to show relative performance with DLSS, SR, quality on, and like really hampering everything. They did use a 9800X 3D for games and a 14900K for apps, but this doesn't bolster my confidence that this is going to enable extra FPS for everybody. The 5070 is going to be 2 times better than the 4070 in Fortnite if you don't turn everything on. It's not gonna be twice as good in Marvel Rivals. It's only gonna do that when you were cranking everything up, which a lot of people complain about ray tracing and DLSS. They don't want the generated frames, which is appearing to be what this is showing. They don't want the ray tracing because it bogs everything down. Maybe this is the generation that finally doesn't take as much of a performance hit when you turn on ray tracing. It's almost the same as rasterized because of the new ray tracing cores, because of the enablements that they can do with DLSS to reduce latency and all of those things. I hope that Blackwell could potentially do that with their 4th gen RT cores and the 5th gen Tensor cores. It remains to be seen. Obviously, third-party benchmarks still have to come out. Release dates, kind of nebulous. As far as I can see on their website, they didn't show it off. The 5090, 5070 Ti, and 5070 are supposed to all be coming out in Q1 or January. It's not quite clear. We'll keep you updated here on Hot News as we get more details. Jensen just walked off stage as I'm filming Hot News. We're trying to get this done last second for you guys to enjoy, but the details aren't quite clear, but there are some amazing things going on with the 50 series. I want to know, I want an engineer to break down how they are cooling 575 watt TDP graphics card in a 2-slot cooler. I want to hear the engineering improvements. When they launched the RTX 30 series Founders Edition, they spent like 15 minutes talking about the airflow and the path to how they put the fans in 2 different orientations to make sure it could blow all the air the right place. This time, they didn't say nothing. They just said, hey, look at it. It's 2 slots. And I'm flabbergasted. I want to know more details. I'm really curious. No price increases for anybody besides the bougiest of gamers. Let me know what you think down below in the comments while we look over Friday's episode of Hot News. Comments there. We got Cheese Master saying the lack of VRAM is a true tragedy. And Water Replays saying 5080 for 1600 and 5090 for 2600. That is madness. That appears to only be for non-US regions. If you add in import taxes and then you add in things like VAT, which let's remember, Americans do not include tax in our prices, whereas many other countries do. So when you add in the tax for a 5080. In certain regions, it's going to be about $1050. In certain regions, it's going to be about $1,100. It's a little bit more expensive, but it doesn't appear to be as bad. A $1999 for the 5090, not nice, but you weren't buying a 5090 anyways. The average person's not buying a 5090. It appears that the 5090 owners are subsidizing the lack of price increases for everybody. Then Ajmi saying, if 9800X3D was in stock, it would sell the numbers of the 7800 immediately. I agree. 9800X3D finally came back in like back order stock on Amazon, and I picked up a couple for builds. I needed to make sure that we have them ready. And then Vasu is saying, it's funny how UFD sells his 9800X3D for over $100 over MSRP. 587 USD in Germany is wild for someone who was so against the 9800X3D. What? I don't sell CPUs? And the two 9800X3Ds that I bought at retail from B&H for $480, I gave away to both of my employees. And the next 9800X3D I'm buying is also going to another one of my employees. I don't know what you mean. I don't sell stuff. I don't want to be in retail. I don't like the idea of working with customers. And then Pearl Lichtman saying, I noticed on some other channels they've been testing the Arc B580 on CPUs that don't meet Intel's listed system requirements, which they printed on packaging as Core 10th Gen AMD 3000 non-GE or newer, and claiming they found an issue. I'm glad you don't do that, but care to comment on it. And then saying, by the way, Hardware Canucks didn't handle fact-checking well. You're mistaking the requirements. Okay, I do have some thoughts on this. A lot of it centers around how reviews are done. So there's this big disconnect in how reviews are done by some of the most preeminent channels. And this is something that our review methodology tends to shy away from, just because I actually don't think it's helpful to a certain populace the way that it's done, but it is helpful. It's very good data. So places like Hardware Unboxed and Gamers Nexus, they're giving you the most rigorous, scientific, lab-based approach to game testing, and it is good. It is a great way to know in a vacuum what the performance difference is between the GPUs and is between the CPUs. You don't want a GPU bottleneck when you're testing a CPU, and you don't want a CPU bottleneck when you're testing a GPU. That makes a ton of sense for making sure you get empirical data. It's good, it's necessary, but it leaves this kind of space where you have the practical setup, right? Testing a Arc B580 with a 9800X3D is not helpful to many people because they're not going to spend $500 on a CPU, as well as $300 on a motherboard, as well as $200-300 on RAM, and then slap in a $280 graphics card. That's not the average use case, right? So there's this space where some reviews should take the less stringent, purely empirical approach and rather take the here's what the normal consumer would do approach. B580 with 7600, B580 with i5-10600. I think that needs to happen a lot more. And I think there's absolutely valid reasons to test a B580 with non-supported stuff. I don't think, based on what I've seen of Hardware Canucks reporting on this, that they were trying to say that they discovered this issue that is like, you shouldn't buy Intel, but rather, I think it's helpful data. We should know how much performance you lose when you go with older CPUs. I think that needs to happen. I think those types of reviews are super valuable, and it's weird. Like, there's this weird space of like, you have to have the empirical data to make sure companies aren't lying to us. And then you also need to have this real world stuff where it's like, you need to test this with what people are actually going to be using it with. And it really does come down to take in a plethora of reviews. Don't just let one source be the defining details. Gamers Nexus, Hardware Unboxed, with all of their testing is fantastic, but there's still valid perspectives outside of that purely scientific empirical approach that they take. That's good information to have, and I'm not necessarily against it. But I am against filming more hot news. I've been filming for over half an hour. I need to get out of here. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back with more of the hottest tech news, hopefully tomorrow. See you then, my friends.